non-pandemic, we would all be sitting to talk to you about grief and bereavement, which are absolutely, I would say, intrinsically tied with sorry, I'm a little bit distracted by the comments. Why no holiday today? We should have had a holiday. Sorry. Happy Holi. Okay. So yeah, just coming back. I think more people are logging in. Okay, so like I said, we're here to talk about grief and bereavement, and these are things that are part and parcel of the work that we do, not just in palliative care, but in healthcare practice across the board. And it is, I think, important for us to be a little bit more familiar with the concepts. I'm not going to go into many interventional strategies, a few perhaps which are fundamental, but by and large, I'm just going to look at some of the frameworks with you and get your ideas and thoughts on how we can manage grief and bereavement as well. So I'm going to just dive right in, and we're going to stop, like I said, from time to time. I'm going to come back and check back with you on your responses and reflections, perhaps. Okay, so here we go. First of all, what is grief? And we all know that grief and the rituals of mourning are healthy adaptations to loss. It's not pathological to grieve when you lose something. It is an absolutely natural response when you have lost something. We will talk about what the pathological ways in which grief manifests are later. But by and large, grief, as we know it, is a healthy adaptation. And so are the rituals of mourning that every culture have developed around grief. Now, if we grieve something that we lose, what are some of the losses that we can potentially face in our lives? What are some of the losses that we would grieve? And I want you to please think about this from the perspective of illness and life-limiting and life-threatening conditions. What are some of the types of losses that people experience along the way? Any thoughts? Please use the chat box. Please unmute, whichever one you prefer. Loss of function in a body like a disability. Yes, Pony, thank you. Loss of life. Absolutely. What else? What are the other losses that we grieve? Memory, functionality in a family. Pets, absolutely. What else? What are the other losses our patients and their families experience? Work. And if you lose work, what else do you lose? Yes, Atsung says relationships. How do we lose relationships when someone is ill? Finances. There could be several reasons for losing finances. Great. I can see that all of you have got the hang of it. And please keep your answers coming in. I'm just going to take you through the ones that I have listed. Identity and customary roles. When a person falls sick, when they get diagnosed with an illness, one of the first things they lose is their identity. Why do I say that? Now, in this room, if I were to ask a question out loud, who are you? Who are you? How would you respond to that? You don't have to respond to me here, but if you want, you can use the chat box. Who are you? How do you identify yourself? What are some of the things that you might say in a situation like that in response? Name, designation. Yeah. There are many people here who are counselors. There are many people here who are teachers. Apart from also your professional designation, who are you at home? Yeah, you have a name that your family calls you. Okay. But who are you at home also to others? Decision maker, father, husband. Yeah. Okay. Great. The minute you are parent, spouse, correct. So the minute you have a serious diagnosis, very often you become the patient, like Harpreet said. Yeah. And not just to the doctors and stuff, even to the people at home. Even if you are still able to perform some of the functions, the people around you, out of love, will say, please don't get up and do that. I will do it. Hai. So you in your attempt to ease somebody else's burden, we also take away their autonomy a little bit, and that role is lost. And if, suppose because of an illness, you can no longer pursue your profession, if you can no longer do the things that you used to do at home, then who are you? So identity and roles are two of the first things that fall away when somebody is diagnosed with a serious condition. Somebody had mentioned physical function. It could be a disability. It could be something you lose because of surgery. It could be that the disease has progressed. You have lost mobility. It could be your ability to have the ability to feed yourself, bathe, bowel obstructions, bowel control loss. It could be memory loss, like somebody said. It could be the loss of the use of a limb. It could be any of those things. All of those are losses as well, physical losses. And Atsung had said relationships. How do we lose relationships when somebody is sick? Why would we lose relationships? How does that happen? Would anyone like to elaborate on that? Why do we lose relationships? What causes relationships to be lost when somebody is not well?
Functioning of the person. There will be changes in the functioning of the person. His emotions may change.
Yeah.
He may have psychological problems or something like that.
Okay. But how does the relationship get lost? Atsung, I saw that you had...
There will be a block. There will be a block coming in between the persons and around and the patient.
Right.
There will be a block, like communication will be, there will be a block in between them. Right.
Okay.
Failure in taking responsibilities.
Could be that, yes. Anything else?
Emotionally, it can be quite difficult to go through it.
Yeah.
And a strain in sharing financial burdens.
Yes, absolutely. There are also stigmatized illnesses where people are abandoned. Yeah, we know 40% of women with cervical cancer are abandoned by their spouses globally. We know that to be true of certain other congenital anomalies where women give birth to children with certain illnesses. We also, when role reversal is not handled well, relationships can be lost. Absolutely. There can be conflict in relationships because, just like I've said this a few times, families that are dysfunctional before a crisis hits, the dysfunction only gets worse. So there might be issues in collusion, conflict, decision making about finances. There could be so many different things, but the loss of a role itself may lead to the loss of a relationship, right? Also, in some illnesses, especially head and neck cancers and the disfiguring illnesses, people socially withdraw. They no longer want to be social. They don't want to meet people around them, and those relationships get lost. Your friends might want to come across a few times to check on you, but after a while, if they're not received openly, they might not come because it gets awkward for them as well. And that happens with a lot of illnesses. Yeah. So relationships can be lost, and that is a big loss. It's a tremendous loss. Material and economic losses, as we know, healthcare is not cheap, and we lose a lot of our assets and materials. People might mortgage their homes, they might sell possessions, they might break their FDs and cut into their savings. There could be so many different things in which material and economic losses are incurred. Time. We lose time. Why do we lose time? Because a lot of our time then goes towards taking the person to the hospital, making appointments, going for the procedures, going for the interventions, trying to get another doctor. The person itself who's going through it has lost that much time. Time is lost. Time that you would have otherwise invested in other places, that time is gone. And that's also a tremendous loss. Okay. Opportunities. Caregivers who have to give up a job in order to stay home. Yeah. You've lost your job because you're not well. You have to take time out for your treatment. This is not necessarily in a terminal disease. It could even be in an acute illness where there is a recovery, right? And you might have been up for a promotion, but because you're in recovery now, you've lost that opportunity. We've talked about children not being able to study anymore because the money needs to be used for treatment. The opportunity to go to a college of their choice is lost. There are so many different opportunities that are lost. Plans are lost. The plans for our future. Yeah. And we all experienced this when we went through COVID, did we not? How many of us made big plans in 2019? And all of us lost those plans in the next couple of years. And those plans, for some of us, those plans were very important plans. So plans are lost. Autonomy, like I said right in the beginning. When a person falls sick, one of the first things they lose is their autonomy. Suddenly, everybody else is making decisions for you. Not just the doctors, also your caregivers, also your neighbor's uncle who knows somebody who had that disease is also making decisions for you or influencing your family's decisions. So suddenly, everything about your body, all your decisions, whatever you want to do is everybody else's business. Your sense of autonomy is lost. And you can no longer, in a lot of situations, people don't have the ability to make decisions that they would like for themselves. Yeah. And autonomy is a big one to lose. And a lot of older people especially struggle with this a great deal. We lose control of our lives when we are diagnosed with a serious illness because we have lost. And if we lose our finances, we lose time, we lose opportunities, plans, autonomy, we just lose control. And again, that is one of the toughest things for people to get come to terms with, just losing control of everything. And oftentimes I find that, caregivers who are in their 30s, 40s, who are looking after their parents who are not well, they can't understand. I mean, for a lot of them, I hear the frustration that they cannot get through to their parents because they cannot get them to, maybe comply with certain prescriptions or certain interventions that are prescribed. And that resistance sometimes has to do with this, trying to retain any kind of control that they have. And so in our treatment or in our management of people with palliative care, try and give them something that they feel they have a sense of control of. And that can really go a long way in giving them some sense of stability. And finally, dignity is a big one. People who fall sick, people who are diagnosed with illnesses, they lose their sense of dignity at the hands of the healthcare system and at the hands of even relatives and friends and well-wishers. And we know that dignity means different things to different people. But a simple thing, when you go in for a hospital, does anybody ask you, about a catheter change or privacy or what, all of those things? A procedure is done very clinically. Sometimes there is an audience. Sometimes there are younger medical students who are watching. A catheter being changed, a sponge bath being given, or any of those things, any of those procedures, a colonoscopy, or whatever it might be. There is a loss of dignity because suddenly you're not asked these questions. And a loss of dignity not just comes from a physical, space. It also comes from the fact that having accomplished everything that you have, you might be a teacher, you might have the respect of your community. Suddenly you're reduced to a patient, to a case number, to a bed number. And that loss of that is also a loss of dignity. Okay. And like someone said earlier, the loss of a functioning member. And when I say a functioning member, I don't just mean in the tasks that the person carries out physically in the home. It's, or, materially, like the breadwinner, or somebody who is, the housekeeper or whatever. It's not that. It's also the emotional role that the person plays. The person might be the one who is the emotional comfort person in the family, who is actually the bridge between different people. She's the one, or he's the one who's a buffer between two conflicting personalities in the family. A functioning member could also be the person who, keeps everyone lighthearted. It could be the person who makes all the decisions. So those kind of roles that people play are lost when a family loses somebody to an illness, and it's not necessarily to death. Okay. Now, grief is not just a emotional experience, it is a total human experience. And what do I mean by that? Grief is felt physically. How do we feel grief physically? Where do you feel grief? When you're sad, where do you feel it? Where do you feel it in your body? Do you feel it in your body at all, or is it just something else? Shaidur says he feels unwell.
Tiredness, general body weakness,
Fatigue.
not feeling like doing anything.
Okay.
A choking sensation.
Yeah, in your throat. Yeah.
Yeah.
A feeling of heartbreak, somebody says, yes. Where else do you feel your grief?
Shortness of breath.
Shortness.
Anxiety.
Anxiety. Yeah. Okay. So we'll agree that we all feel different emotions in our body as well. It's not just, so grief, heaviness in the chest, choking, feeling unable to get your words out, this lethargy, fatigue, exhaustion, not being able to do anything. There are so many different ways in which we feel our grief. Some people feel it in the gut. No, if you're really sad, some people can't eat. Or when you're really sad, some people only eat. It's it's comfort eating. We're all familiar with our eating habits when we're not feeling too good about ourselves. No, so different emotions manifest physically as well. And so grief is a physical thing. It manifests physically. Grief is a cognitive experience. How is it a cognitive experience? Cognitively, when you're really, really grieving and when you're sad, it's very hard to concentrate. It's very hard to pay attention. Yeah. Imagine if you had to go for like a long class on like some very technical topic when you're really, really emotional. Are you going to be able to pay attention? No. Even memory, somebody said loss of memory. You have gaps in your memory, you become forgetful. Problem solving becomes a problem for some people. You're not able to think logically, or something that you could have easily solved earlier, you can't solve anymore. So cognitively it affects us. It affects us at a spiritual level, and I don't just mean this in terms of religious faith, although that is one part, and a lot of people question their God, they question why this is happening, but I also mean spirituality in the way of meaning, purpose, hope, connection. All of these things are affected. Yeah, what is the meaning of this experience? Why did it's so meaningless that this happened? It's senseless that this happened. Why did someone so good have to go through this? Yeah, without this person, I don't have any more hope in my life. Okay. Grief is an emotional experience, as we all know, deep sadness. It could also, grief could also lead to other emotions, right? When you're sad, when you're grieving somebody, it's not only sadness. There could be other emotions that also come up in the grief process. Okay. What are some of the other emotions? What are some of the other emotions you might feel when you're grieving? Lack of depression. Okay, we're going to talk about grief and depression in the end. Yeah. Anything else? Is sadness the only thing you feel when you grieve the loss of something? Anger, big one. Yeah. Pony, you were going to say something?
Yeah, a sense of left out, alone,
Okay.
frustration.
Yeah. Frustration. Numbness, also somebody said.
Yeah.
not being alive when you're still alive. Yeah, that is utter hopelessness. No, that is just completely being cut off from a sense of being alive. Yes, that's also very spiritual. That's a spiritual aspect of grief. That's that loss of meaning and connection. Okay, so anyway, we all get the drift, that this is that this happens emotionally. How is grief experienced socially? How does grief happen socially? Why do we say that grief is a social experience as well?
One might isolate themselves.
Yeah. So it's an experience, right? If you look at any culture in the world, after the bereavement, after the person has died, there is a period that every faith, every tradition gives you to perform certain rituals, usually in usually along with other people. There are days for people to visit, there are days to eat certain things, there are days to do certain ceremonies, right? And this sort of social cocooning is really important for us to absorb what has happened, to be supported at the time. Now, like you said, some people might withdraw from that. They might do it mechanically, but they're really not present, and for a while they might actually completely withdraw from society if the grief has hit them very hard. The kind of grief they're experiencing also determines that. I will talk to you about that in just a little while, and then maybe we can circle back to what social experience of grief is. I'm just looking at the time to see if we can do this. All right, can I request, do all of you have a piece of paper, like a page handy? Do you have a piece of paper handy, a big enough page? Just use the thumbs up emoji when you all have the paper ready, so that I know when majority of the group is ready, then we can start with this. At the bottom of your screen, there's a reaction button. Yeah, if you can do that, that'll tell me that you have a piece of paper handy. It'll also tell me how many people are here in class. All right. Okay. Fantastic. I can see a raised hand as well. Thank you. All right. What I'm going to ask you to do now is, I want you to, well, how are you going to do this? I want you to somehow cut up that piece of paper into 12 bits, 12 bits. So either you can have 4 columns and 3 rows, or you can have 3 columns, 4 rows, whatever. I want you to tear that paper up into 12 little boxes. Tear it up into separate chits. Yeah. So you can fold it, tear it, fold it, tear it, fold it, tear it, however you wish. And please let me know when you've done that. Okay, once again, when you're ready, use this reaction button. Senior, you're going to help me count when enough people are.
Yes, ma'am. You can do that.
All right. I think if we have 10 to 12 people, we have 34 people, 32 if we don't count you and me.
Yes.
All right. So even if we get to about 12 to 16 people, that's great. Okay. Let's get started, huh? You've torn it up. You have 12 chits in your hand. Now, I want you to take 3 chits out. Okay. And in 3 of those chits, I want you to write in each chit one name of one person you care about a lot. So there are 3 names you're going to put down, one on each of those 3 chits. Like 3 people you love the most. Nobody's going to see your chits, so don't worry. You can write whoever's name you want.
So 3 names and 3 chits.
So one name per chit.
Yeah. Okay.
One name per chit, and then fold it once and put it aside. Okay, I want you to make a pile of those 3 names. Please feel free to use the reaction button generously and let me know when you're done with this part of the exercise. One name per chit, 3 names.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Let me ask something. May I know who is this using this Galaxy J5 Prime? I can see a lady wearing glasses, sunglasses, writing on a paper nearby her son, and I think her husband also. May I know your name, please, ma'am? Please unmute, ma'am.
My name is Sujata.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. It's for the purpose of attendance. Thank you. Thank you. You can
Okay.
continue.
Total 3, Shadu, 3 names. One name per chit. So 3 chits, one name per chit. Okay. All right. Put that pile of 3 in one corner. Now take the next 3. I want you to take 3 more empty chits. 3 more empty chits. And in each of those chits, I want you to write one possession that you have that is important to you. A possession, a possession. It could be your phone, it could be your house, it could be a watch somebody gave you. So again, 3 chits, 1 item per chit, something that you own that is important to you. It could be a book. I know many of us think of our pets as family, but it could also be a pet. Something you own. All right. I don't want you thinking too much about it. The first 3 things that come to your mind, those are usually the right answers. Okay, third set. So you've got 6 chits written. Now the next 3. Okay. On each of these chits, I want you to write 3 activities that you really love to do. Usually when I do this exercise, majority of the class says sleep. Which is really dangerous in an afternoon class to hear. But 3 activities that you really love to do. It could be going to the movies, it could be going for a walk, it could be listening to music, it could be, I don't know, doing Bharatnatyam, it could be anything. 3 activities that you really love to do. It could be sleeping also, it's fine. All right. Please let me know when you're ready. Senior, I can see one. I'm going to be switching between, yeah, I can see some thumbs ups.
Ma'am.
There are some people I've not seen any activity from, which is
Most probably they are sleeping.
in the activity that they enjoy.
They like it after.
All right. Okay. Very concerning. All right. So last 3 chits, huh? Last 3 chits. I want you to write on each of these chits 3 roles that you play in people's lives that are important to you. 3 roles that you play that are important to you. Mother, sister, friend. It's all right, Amal Raj, no problem. Thank you for letting us know. Okay, so it could be 3 roles: friend, brother, sister, teacher, student. Anything. 3 rolls. Don't think too much. All right. Thumbs ups. Can I see the thumbs ups so we can know when to move on? Yep. Oh, okay, great. All right. So now I want you to just place all these chits in front of you so you can see them. You know which chits are what, right? Now we're going to go through a simulation. Yeah. You're all in different parts of the country. You all have different experiences. So some of you might need to use a little bit more imagination than others, but just, indulge me on this. So I want you to imagine now, okay, today is Holi. You're going to finish this class, which should have been canceled on Holi, but it's not, but here we are. So at 4:30, after you finish this class, you're going to go out and you're going to meet your friends. You're going to hopefully have a nice evening. You're going to hang out with family, whatever else it is. Sometime in the course of the next 1 week, say you develop a cough. And the greatest reason for coughs in India is change of weather. I mean, that's like a, that's, if you ask anybody, the reason for any sickness before the pandemic, it was change in weather. So anyway, it is the change in weather. And you think nothing of it. Okay. 2 weeks later, that cough is not gone. So some of us might go and help ourselves to some over-the-counter medication, which we easily get, some cough syrup. Some of us have doctor friends who might say, hey, I think it's time to take some azithromycin or whatever it is. And so you do that first round of treatment and feel a little bit of relief, but not enough. And over a period of time, that cough turns into a pretty bad wheeze, and you find that you're more and more tired, you're more and more fatigued, and you're worried that it could be COVID, but it's not. You've done the RT-PCR, it's not that. And eventually you decide to go to the GP, and he tells you that maybe you need to get an X-ray. And the X-ray results come, and the news is not very good. At least the GP thinks it's a little bit more serious and you might need to see a specialist, but he does recommend that you get a CT scan done. So now that you are in this position where you know that, okay, it's not just a regular cough, you set up an appointment, you go, you get the CT scan done. And what the CT scan does is shows you that there could be a growth in your lung. We don't know what kind of growth it is, but it's not looking good. Now, right now in front of you, I want you to take any 3 of those chits, Choose any 3 chits and tear them up. Read what you're tearing, okay? It's not an unthought thing. Pick 3 chits. You are suddenly faced with this idea that you have a serious illness. It's not looking good. You don't know what tomorrow's session is going to be about. But you know now that things are going to change from here on. And I want you to take 3 chits, 3 things that you're okay to give up at this point. Okay? Thumbs up? All right. So then you go for your CT scan, you've got your results. You go back to the doctor says, hey, listen, we need to do some blood work. The blood work is showing again, some parameters are off. And then he says, listen, the only way to do this is to get a biopsy, and you get a biopsy. Results come back. It's confirmed, it's malignant. So now you know that you have a malignancy, and what you're told is that it's an advanced stage. Now you know that you have an advanced kind of lung cancer. I want you to look at those chits on your table, on your lap, over there. What are you going to lose now out of your activities, roles, people, and possessions? This diagnosis of advanced lung cancer is going to make you give up a few of those things. I want you to pick 3 things. Maybe you need to quit your job. Maybe you choose. Imli, you need to choose what you're going to give up at this point. It could be a role that you give up. It could be a possession that you give up. And when I say give up, it could also mean be forced to give up. An activity that you really like to do. If you like to be a marathon runner, if you're a long distance runner, that's probably something that you're going to have to give up around now. If you like dancing, that's probably something that you might have to give up on now. Okay, ready? No cheating. Once you've torn it, you have to throw it. You can't bring that quietly back onto your tables. Once it's torn, it's gone. You can't exchange later. All right. Now that your diagnosis is confirmed, you have to get on aggressive treatment, and you've started a pretty aggressive form of chemotherapy, and it's left you exhausted. You cannot sleep. Your appetite is gone. You just about start getting better after the side effects before it's time for your next round of treatment, and then it knocks you out again. So maybe in a week you have one good day where you have enough energy to do something. Yeah. And you think of people in your life that you want to catch up with, who you don't know if you're going to see them. So you're trying to make calls to get people to come across, or to, speak to people, or you might not even want to talk to them. It does, whatever. Everyone's decision is different. It's stressful work, isn't it? Yeah, it is. It's not meant to be a fun exercise. All right. So now your treatment is over. You're resting. The doctors tell you to come back after 1 month to see if the treatment has worked. You go back. Your whole family is very hopeful. You go back with 1 or 2 people that you really care about. The doctor sits down in front of you and says, "I'm so sorry, but the results are not what we expected them to be. And I don't think your body can withstand any more chemotherapy. There are other lines of intervention. One is this, we can do this surgery, or we can do this other therapy, and it's going to cost you something like 20 lakh rupees if you opt for it. So these are the choices in front of you. If you don't want that, then I'm sorry, there's nothing else that you can do. Okay, you've made your choice. And for those of you who have tried that interventional therapy, that alternative experimental therapy, you finish it, you go back, and you find out that even that hasn't worked. So not only has it not worked, you're also now 20 lakhs down. How many chits do you have on your table at the moment? You have 3 or 6? 3. 6.
6, ma'am.
All right. So now I want you to tear up 3 more. Quickly. I'm not going to give you any more time. You have 5 seconds to choose 3 chits and tear it up. Tear it up and throw it. You're not seeing it again. Got it. I want to see more thumbs up right now. Yeah. All right. Okay. Done. Quickly, guys. All right. Done. Okay, fine. Now you have 3 chits, huh? You have 3 chits left. Look very closely at those 3 chits. You've come back, and the doctor has now told you, "I'm sorry, we're at the end of the line. All we can do is pain management. At best, a couple of weeks." You have a couple of weeks. Now I want you to take a good look at those 3 chits. Out of those 3, I want you to tear 1. Tear 1 out of those 3. Tear it up quickly. We're running out of time. Done? It is difficult. You're not going to get another 2 seconds. Come on. If you don't tear it up in the next 3 seconds, I'm going to tear up all 3. So, tear it, tear it. Done? Yes? Let's see. All right. Okay. Now you have 2 left. You have 2 chits left. So here you are in your final phase of your, death is imminent. And you have these 2 chits left with you. You have to, Saraswati, sorry. You have to. Yeah, you got to do it. These are choices you're making. All right. So now we're down to your last week. No, last week, not even week, last days. You have these 2 chits in front of you. Okay, look carefully at those 2 chits. Now I want you to hold 1 chit in each hand. You have 2 chits, one chit in each hand, left and right. All right. Hold it up so I can see that you're doing it. No cheating. All right. Great. I want you to take the chit in your left hand and throw it. It's not a choice you're making. I'm choosing that for you. Whatever's in your left hand, throw it. Chuck it, chuck it. I know you were saving that, but it's gone now. Okay. So, how's everybody feeling on a scale of 1 to 10 of stress? Use the chat box.
Yeah, 12.
All right. Let's see those numbers, guys. Come on, let's see those numbers. Awful. All right, 15. Okay. Heartbreaking. All right. Okay, so this is just a glimpse of what what your patients go through. Notice that right until the end, you had a choice. Right until the end, you had a choice. That last choice I took away from you. What did you feel when I told you which chit to throw away? It wasn't your choice. I told you to do it. Did you get angry at me?
How rude.
Rude. I'm sure I was not very popular with unfair. Yeah. I'm sure I was not a very popular person in that moment with any of you. Right? Anyway, so this is I want you to actually go back and sit with this exercise later. I would have ideally loved to do this with you in person. Okay, because I can tell you I've been cursed a lot towards the end of that exercise by people sitting and like looking at me in absolute fury, because there I don't ask them to tear it. I actually walk across and I rip up papers without telling them which one I'm going to take. So yeah, I've had some people cuss me at also. All right. So, but this is how it is. Very often our patients, their families, they don't get choices. They have to give up stuff that means important things to them. Just it by way of reflection. Was for any of you, was it a possession that was the last 3? Were there any possessions in your last 3 chits? I'm guessing for most of you it was people, wasn't it? Or roles.
I had.
What did you have, Sandhya?
I had my cross.
You had your cross. That's your faith. Okay, so that's not, yeah, that's more than a possession. All right. My camera, you had to throw your camera, Evan. Did I take that one? All right, role and loving one. Yeah, all right. Anyway, so go back, sit with this exercise. Understand that this is something that our patients and their families experience at a massive level. This was an exercise. This was a simulation. All of those things you threw away, you can pick it up from the dustbin and go back and give them a hug when you see them in real life. Okay. Anyway, so I'm going to come back to our session now. grief is a total experience, and it's made up of all these different losses which we just experienced also firsthand for a little while today. And there are many factors that influence grief. One is the way we attach ourselves to our loved ones and attachment styles. I'm not going to go into this. Please look up Mary Ainsworth's study. She talks about the different ways in which children attach themselves to adults and how that has a bearing on their future relationships as well as on the death and grief process. How families are structured in terms of subgroups, boundaries, flexibilities. There are those amongst you who are closer to other members in your family, right? There are people who you're almost like allies. There are some people that you gang up on. There are people that you trust. There are people who play more games with one another. So, so there are structures. There's the parental unit. There's the sibling unit. There's a parent-child unit. One parent might be closer to another child. So there are different ways in which it is structured, and how flexible these structures are with each other, how they interact with one another, that also affects the grieving process. Communication patterns within the families, who talks to whom, who is approachable, who is the decision maker. If I need to talk to my father, do I need to go through my mother? Or is my father the one who looks, who's the one who jokes around and it's easier for me to talk to? Is my sibling the one who's going to, be the one who does, all the mischief with me? And so am I able to speak freely about my decisions to the people in my family? Who is it that I need to be a little bit more reserved with? Those sort of communication patterns within the family. In some cases, it's verbal violence. There's verbal abuse. There are people that you'll never be able to open up to. How much social support does the family have? Okay, is it a cohesive family that engages with their social networks? Do they as a family engage with their, say, group or faith groups, their church groups? Do they as a family engage with their local, community members in other ways? How are they? Are they isolated or are they engaged? Now, if you see this, attachment is very, very, very personal, one-on-one. Family structures, how the family is, family structure and communication. This is how the family unit is. And then there is the social support, how the family functions within society. Okay. Okay. Now, there are three aspects to grief: how we experience grief inside, how we express it outwardly, and how we adapt to the loss that we are grieving. All right. So this is Doka and Martin. You can look up their work as well. So how we experience inside, how we express it, and how we adapt to a loss. Now, there are how we experience and express. Historically, there were gender stereotypes. There still are, right? Women, it's okay for them to cry. Men don't cry. And we tell boys also, no, boys also shouldn't be crying. If a boy cries, you say, stop being such a girl. So the way people express grief and other emotions was very often gender stereotyped. Later, researchers said, listen, this is not happening. It's too gendered. So let's call it feminine and masculine ways of expressing grief. But then somebody else pointed out that, hey, no, that's also stereotypical, no? So if a man cries, you're still saying, but that's a feminine way. And you're saying it in a way that's not exactly complimentary. So these guys, Doka and Martin, also came up with something called intuitive and instrumental, where they said that irrespective of your gender, whether you're male, female, transgender, intersex, whatever it is, some people are able to invest more energy in emotion, feeling. They're able to spontaneously express their feelings, and they're able to share their inner experiences with those around them. It could be a man, it could be a woman, it could be anyone. There are those who we call instrumental, who invest more energy in cognitive and intellectual domains, and they prefer to discuss problems over feelings. How can I fix this? Rather than how are you feeling? These are the doers. They prefer to do rather than be. Okay. and they need to be active in order to feel like they're addressing. Now, it's not necessary that we are either or. Very often we are a mix of both. It's just that one might be predominant. So most of us are blended. But depending on the context, the situation that we're in, we will express ourselves. Some of us might be more intuitive with our families and our close friends, but instrumental when we go to work. Obviously, we're not going to sit and cry at work and, you know, share our innermost feelings and things like that. So we're able to move between the two. And the good thing is that the people around us support the way in which we choose to express. But there are those amongst us who are dissonant, where we might want to we might feel it in a particular way and want to express it in a particular way, but society doesn't allow us to do it. And this is not just about men crying. It's also about a woman not crying when someone close to her has died. Isn't she considered a little bit off if a woman expresses absolutely no emotion? Yeah. So it could go either way. So dissonance. So some of us might be problem solvers. We might grieve later in private, but we just want to fix things. And then you have people around you saying, look at her, mother has died, and all she's worried about is paying the bills and organizing the funeral. She hasn't even sat down and expressed her sadness. What's wrong with her? Yeah. So there's that dissonance. But by and large, nowadays, the way we express grief is seen in terms of intuitive and instrumental, not feminine and masculine. Okay. We all know the stages of grief that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross made very popular. She was the first thanatologist, the first person to study death and dying. And her 5 stages of grief are very, very well known now. But there's a problem there because over the years, it has been misinterpreted to be a linear thing. So we need to remember that denial, acceptance, bargaining, depression, and anger don't necessarily need to happen in that order. Not everybody experiences all 5. And if you experience one, you can very well have another experience as well. I might accept that the person has died. Doesn't stop me from being angry about it. Yeah. Now, while we were doing this exercise just now with the chips, how many of these emotions did you feel? You might have bounced around between these a few times, no? Where you're also weighing which chip to tear. You might have felt a little bit of anger. You might have felt a little bit of depression, sadness, despair. You might have been angry, like I said, towards the end when choices were taken away from you, or the very fact that you have to make these choices. Fear, yeah. So the 5 stages of grief, while it set the stage for the fact that grief goes through these different emotions, it's not the only way to look at it. And now what we're going to look at is some of the more I would say, the more contemporary theories around grief. One of them is the Strobe and Schutt theory from 1999, where basically they say that grief is a 2-dimensional process. There are 2 aspects to grieving. One is to actually deal with the loss, be oriented to the loss, and deal with the distress of grief. So it's all about the loss. The other part is about restoration, where eventually you re-engage with life. So, and according to them, it happens simultaneously. You're grieving, you're getting used to the loss, but you're also having to engage in tasks on a day-to-day basis that re-engage you with life. Okay. And what we as helpers or as carers or as facilitators need to know is that this oscillation continues for a long time. You don't get done with the grief work and then move on with life. It happens simultaneously. And we need to give the people that we're caring for the permission to express both. A person might look like they've moved on and 1 year later have a complete breakdown on the anniversary of a death. We have to give them permission to do that. Yeah. The second theory is William Worden. And I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this because this actually breaks down the whole grieving process. And he Some of you are psychologists. You might be familiar with developmental psychology, which talks about how as a child is born and goes through the different, developmental stages, they have to accomplish certain tasks, cognitive tasks, physical tasks, all of those tasks, and they build on one task. It's only when the child completes this task that he is able to move on to the next. And so that's what the framework is. And the mastery of one task impacts the mastery of higher order tasks. If I master this task, it will determine how well I master the next task. And over a period of time, we might revisit certain tasks. Okay, so that's also there. And this particular framework that William Worden came up with is influenced by something that we call the mediators of mourning. Now, I know this all sounds very jargony and complicated, but when I take you through it, you'll know that it's really quite simple. So basically, William Worden's theory is based on tasks and mediators of mourning. And according to him, there are 4 tasks that need to be tackled, really. First is we have to accept the reality of the loss, that the loss has happened. Once we have accepted that the loss has happened, we have to work through the pain of grief. The pain could come in different ways. It could be anger, it could be distress, it could be fear, it could be anxiety, it could be anything, but we have to work through that. And over a period of time, we start adjusting to an environment where the person is no longer living. Yeah, and whatever that means. So for a spouse, it's different. For a parent, it's different, whatever. But we start getting used to an environment without this person. And that's a very tough time in our lives. And finally, we emotionally and spiritually relocate the deceased and re-engage with life. Now, what does that mean? This is a very important thing. In palliative care and in grief work, we talk about this idea of continuing bonds. What that means is just because a person has died, our relationship is not over. It changes. If my mother dies, do I stop being a daughter? No. Spiritually, I can always, go back to the fact that, yes, that was my mom. I remain her daughter in some way or form. It's a continuing bond that I have with her. If my husband dies, I might become a widow, but I have a continuing bond, whether in my mind or in my heart, with him. But we need to relocate that emotional and spiritual energy and re-engage with life. So this is a bit of an esoteric task, but it is an important one. Okay. There's a beautiful series on, I don't know if it's on Amazon or wherever, it's called Modern Love. And there's in the second series, the first episode is about this woman whose husband has died and she's moving on with another relationship, and how she continues to have these conversations with her dead husband when she goes on drives in his old car. She imagines that he's sitting next to her, and she has this conversation. She deeply loves her current husband, but this is how she's emotionally and spiritually displaced this person who was also her best friend before he died. Okay, so that also manifests in different ways. Okay, so these are the tasks, according to William Worden, that we need to complete in order to live with our grief better. And how we form attachments is a developmental task, and how we handle separation from attachment figures can either lead to growth or it can lead to pathology. Now, what do I mean by this? If a child has an insecure bonding or an attachment with a parent right from childhood, every time the mother leaves the room, he starts crying because he's not sure whether she's going to come back or not. He's insecurely attached, and he becomes a clingy child. And that sort of emotional clinginess is there right through life. When the time comes for the mother to die, that emotional clinginess may end up as a pathology, because there are certain needs, emotional needs, that only that person fulfills. Now, we all have those kind of relationships, but in this case, it's pathological. That person cannot function without the other person around to do certain tasks for them. Okay, so if you just look up attachment styles and impact on grief, that will tell you a lot more. And I'm not going to go into that in any greater detail right now because I'm mindful of the time. What are the mediators of mourning? Whenever you come across somebody who has lost someone, And this is, I'm assuming, why all of you are in a palliative care foundation program, that you hope to work with, or you're already working with people who are ill or seriously ill or working with different health challenges. If you come across somebody who has lost a loved one, what are the things that you need to know about that person? Firstly, who died? Who died? Was it a parent? Was it a loved one? Was it a conflicted relationship? Was it a friend? Was it a, relative? What was it? What was the nature of the attachment? Was it a healthy relationship? Sorry, I said conflicted relationship earlier, that comes here. Was it a unhealthy relationship? Was it a toxic relationship? Was it an abusive relationship? Was the person highly dependent? Yeah. What kind of death was it? Was it a prolonged death? Was it a sudden death? Was it a painful death? Was it a peaceful death? Was it an accident? Was it expected? Was it a disease? How does this loss impact the person's sense of self? How does it impact their sense of self? Oh, I am so lost without this person. I don't know what I'm going to do. He was the one who looked after me all the time. My mother used to be the one who really encouraged me and told me that I could make a difference. Now she's gone. I don't know who I am. So how does the loss of the person impact this person? What is that person's previous experience with loss? Have they had experience with loss before, or is this their first loss? Huh? And have they had multiple losses in the recent year? So have they had it, or is this something that they just, it's the first time they're experiencing it? How well or badly were earlier losses handled? Very important one. It tells you how that person copes. Yeah. I couldn't get out of my room for 3 months. That tells you that this person probably needs special attention. Some people might have attempted to end their lives. Some people might have attempted self-harm. Some people did what was required of them and, kept engaging with life and handled it well. Some people leaned on their friends and got through it. So how well or badly were the losses handled? That will tell you how well or badly they might handle this one. How much social support do they have? Are they isolated or do they have good social support? Are there any secondary losses caused by the death? What do I mean by secondary losses caused by the death? The breadwinner has died. Person has no savings. So now what happens? Secondary losses. Might have to, move to a lower rent house. May need to move back with the parents. May need to give up the car. Sometimes the person who died has not left any information about finances, a lot of debt. Suddenly you have to sell a lot of things to pay off that debt. Loss of social status. Yes, very, very important. They might lose social status. That person might be the one who's maintaining their social status. Loss of safety for a lot of women. Yeah. Loss of support, right? If it's an older person who has lost a younger person, a child or whatever, support system. So what are the other losses that this person experiences because of this loss that they have just experienced? A counselor cannot help people with tasks of mourning without a thorough understanding of these mediators. So this is what will distinguish different people for you. Please, grief does not manifest in the same way for everybody. Please try and answer these questions before you attempt to help that person. And also know that these are not questions you ask. Some of them are observations. So you can't probably ask a person, so what are the secondary losses you've experienced, right? So it comes through a series of conversations that you have, that you get to understand what are the other losses that the person has faced. But these are all very, very important things. These are the mediators of mourning. Once you answer these questions, you are in a better position to help the person that you're faced with. I'm not going to go through these in detail. This is coming back to wordings. Now, once you have those mediators of mourning, then you can go through the 4 tasks that Warden talked about, to acknowledge. Now, to believe that someone is no longer alive is more than just mental assent. It has to be emotionally accepted. There are people who might tell you verbally, yeah, I know he's dead, but they will do things like keeping the room or the closet intact for years. They have emotionally not accepted it. They have mentally accepted it. They've not emotionally accepted it. There is a difference. It's called, Wiseman calls it middle knowledge. Now, it is essential to have both cognitive and emotional acceptance. This is not to say that people always achieve this. Yeah, some people, and usually it's the emotional acceptance that takes a lot longer than the mental and cognitive acceptance. To process the pain of grief, depending on the mediators, some deaths are more painful than others, depending on what kind of, who died, what kind of deaths they had, what kind of relationship they had, what are the losses. In the aftermath of the death, it has led to impoverishment, whatever. There are many, many things. So depending on the mediators, some deaths are more painful than others. And therefore, people also have different abilities to process the pain. And people have serious difficulties in processing this pain. It might lead to displacement of pain into physical disease. It might lead to complicated grief, which is now called prolonged grief disorder. And it might be delayed. So they may not show any signs of grieving right now, but years later, it might resurface, and it might resurface in ways that are very, very unhealthy. Okay. Varying levels of tolerance to emotional pain. Some people just cannot handle it, so they'll distract themselves by engaging in other activities. Some people just outright deny it, or they might just downplay. Yeah, he died. I mean, he was sick for so long. Yeah, what else to expect? I mean, in a way, it's good he died because he was suffering so much. I'm downplaying it because I don't want to get into how much it has actually upset me. And some people might blunt it and numb it by substance use, by becoming workaholics, spending too much time in the office. Anything to take their mind off it. It's slightly different from distraction. And a lot of substance use disorders also are exacerbated by this kind of thing. Okay. Very quickly, there are 3 ways in which people who have experienced loss need to adjust. First of all, they need to adjust to their external world. This is the most obvious thing. Activities of daily living, family roles. Now, okay, the person who used to be the one who did all the finances, somebody has to come and take that role. Na? Somebody did. If she was the mother who took care of, okay, the nutritional needs in the family, somebody is going to step in. Maybe for a while an aunt or a grandmother or a cousin or somebody might come. But even these external adjustments take a period of time. And it's only after in a matter of 4 to 6 months that you realize how much you need to adjust to. For example, I don't know how to fix the fuse. That is something that this other person always used to do. I don't know the passwords to my online accounts. I don't know if we have a savings account or not. He used to handle all the finances. Have we paid the car EMI? I don't know. Okay, this person used to take care of the child's, all the school PTA meetings and all. Now I have to do it. So, over a period of time, even the external adjustments become more and more obvious. And it's in those periods also that people can have slumps of relapses, Okay, so external, internal adjustment, self-definitions. How do we define ourselves as per society's norms? I am now a widow. I am now a single parent. I am an orphan. Our identity, how we start reflecting on who we are. Now, we'd also talked about how death impacts my sense of self. In some relationships, the death of a person might free me up. I might have been a caregiver for 6 years. Now, suddenly, I don't have to do that. What are my interests? I have to discover them, no? Because all this time, all I was focused on was looking after somebody. Feelings towards self. Some people might feel like, okay, I did my best. Some people might feel like they're worthless, they couldn't do enough. Some people might feel like, without this other person, their identity, they don't really know who they are anymore. And like some of you said, social status is also impacted. My sense of self-esteem. When somebody around me dies, someone close to me, my sense of self-esteem. It could be somebody who used to criticize me a lot. It's not always necessary that relationships are good and healthy, right? It could be somebody who actually used to really criticize and berate me. So that also impacts me now. And my sense of efficiency and efficacy in the world. Now that I don't have to look after this person, what can I do in a meaningful way? Am I going to get a job? Am I going to, what am I going to do with my time? All of those things. There is also spiritual adjustment, and particularly difficult when the death is a violent one. When it's a murder, when it's a suicide, when it's a senseless accident, when there's any sort of violence, when there's an overdose, all of those things. And finding meaning after important losses. So that spiritual adjustment gets very, very tricky in situations where the death has been complicated. Okay, and finally, we accept that the person is gone. We go through the process of the painful process of accepting it and moving forward. We adjust to our external, internal, and spiritual worlds. And finally, I'm going to continue my bond with this person, but I'm also going to re-engage and move on with life. So these are the 4 tasks. Like I said, grief and loss do not exist in a vacuum. How we experience grief individually impacts the family, impacts the community. There is something called anticipatory grief. Grief is not something that is always experienced only after a loss. Sometimes we experience it in anticipation of a loss. And this is particularly true of long drawn out illnesses. Yeah. And we know a loss is coming and we're already gearing up for it. And anticipatory grief requires working through many fears. Fears of the unknown. What's going to happen? Of loneliness, of loss of family and friends, of loss of body function for the person who is sick. The patient experiences great anticipatory loss. Yeah. And the loss of identity. Who am I without this person? So that's anticipatory grief. There's one more thing. There is so much written about complicated grief now. It is a vast subject. I will request you to do some background reading on it if you're interested. Complicated grief is intense and long-lasting form of grief. It's a pathological kind of grief. Mostly for us, we experience a loss, we go through these different tasks, and over a period of time, we're able to function, at least we're able to function. And yes, we might feel the grief, but it's not hampering us from functioning in our lives. Complicated grief overwhelms us and it completely derails our ability to function. And usually you see complicated grief when it depends on 3 things: the nature and the relationship with the deceased person. Like I said, it could be a very complex enmeshed relationship, or it could be a heavily dependent relationship. Circumstances of the death and events that occurred after the death. Now, a major trigger of complicated grief is COVID, especially the second surge that people went through, right? Nature of the relationship, our loved ones, circumstances of death, one day the person was fine, they developed some mild symptoms, the symptoms got worse. Before you know it, they went to the hospital and they never came back. We didn't even have a chance to say goodbye. What happens after the death? We were not allowed to have regular funerals. We were not allowed to mourn as a community together. And we were all sort of isolated. And in many, many cases, it was so sudden that there was so much unfinished business. There was so much, other trauma that came out of it. So in fact, we now know that the ICD-10 has accepted prolonged grief disorder as a condition, especially in the wake of COVID-19. So complicated grief, there is already a pandemic of complicated grief, not just in our country, but world over, just because of the nature in which, the way in which people were lost during the pandemic. And finally, I want to introduce you to a very poignant sort of idea, disenfranchised grief. Grief that is considered unacceptable by others. Grief that is considered unacceptable by others. What kind of grief would be unacceptable to others? Can you give me some examples? That society doesn't accept this kind of grief or doesn't validate it. Pets, yes. They're not seen as important as losing a human being. Yeah. You're expected to move on. In fact, recently, a friend of mine, they lost 2 dogs to some sort of weird poisoning. And immediately they went and got 2 more dogs for the kids. It was just, like it kind of negated the relationship that the kids had with those pets in a way. Yeah, so pets. What else? I'm very conscious of the time, so I'm going to move along. A relationship that is not recognized by others because they didn't know you had a relationship. Yeah, either because, there are so many complex dynamics in our society. There are many reasons why people don't know that 2 people have a relationship. The relationship was real, but the family or society does not approve, as in non-traditional relationships, including same-sex relationships. We do not validate that. Okay. And the way the person died is not as supported. For example, a drug overdose, or in some cases, a suicide. In some traditions, suicide is considered a sin. In drug overdose, we see that, it's a choice that this person made, and, they were just heading that way. More and more in our violent society, you see, when there are these shootouts that you hear about, like random people shooting, like, in schools and things, and then shooting themselves. What kind of grief are the parents of that shooter or that terrorist or whatever expected to feel? Relatives of prisoners who have committed serious offenses. This is disenfranchised grief. Another one, healthcare workers. You're supposed to have emotional distance from your patients. Yeah. So the grief that you feel as a healthcare provider is sometimes disenfranchised. You're not given grieving time off, right? When your patient dies, you're supposed to like pick up and move on. Okay, that's disenfranchised grief. To me, it's one of the most poignant kinds of grief, and it's something that we need to all pay attention to. And it is also experienced when the loss is not a person, like Elizabeth said, beloved animals, a failed marriage. Recently, someone talked to me about the fact that she had been divorced for many years, and then her ex-husband had died, and she felt sad about it, but people didn't recognize that she could have felt sad for someone she had divorced. They did share a relationship also, right? So there are all sorts of ways in which you have disenfranchised grief, where your grief is not validated, it's not given the space it needs. Okay. And I'm going to be sharing these slides with you. So some of this is very self-explanatory, and so you can just go through this. Unresolved grief manifestations can show up as illness. It can show up as someone being stuck in a particular emotional state. It could be, in children, especially self-sabotage and acting out behavior, fighting with classmates, failing in class, not paying attention, just causing trouble. In adolescents, and in others, it could be substance use. It could be many things like that. Running with the wrong crowd, so to speak. For some, suicidal ideation. For some, it could be a marked alteration in the style of living and disruption of important relationships. These are some inventories. These are some standardized tools that those of you who are interested in knowing more about can use to assess grief. And what are the goals? What are our goals? When we're counseling somebody who's grieving, what are we trying to do? One is to increase the reality of the loss. If you go by the tasks, we want them to realize that the loss is real. To help the bereaved deal with both the experience and the latent effect. So what they are saying and what they're not expressing, they have to come to terms. To help the bereaved overcome impediments to readjustment. What is stopping them from healthily overcoming certain, coming out of certain stages and re-engaging with life? And to encourage the bereaved to make healthy emotional withdrawal from the deceased and reinvest energy in other relationships. No, your relationship is not over, but would your parents like to see you like this? So we can always commemorate them through things like a memorial. And you see people doing that, they do healthy emotional withdrawals by doing stuff like they might start a scholarship in that person's name. They might plant a tree in that person's name. Those are healthy ways to say, okay, here is a symbol of my relationship with this person. It's ongoing, but I'm also going to move on. So those are some of the ways in which we can help them deal with that. We have to allow people sufficient time to grieve. There is no hard and fast rule that it happens. Most people resolve to a level of functioning in around 1 year's time, but there are others who need more time, and that's fine. Okay. Those of us who are in this work should actually advocate for sufficient time off work for the bereaved, especially in the first few weeks of bereavement. And we need to understand that grief spikes continue for life through events, holidays, anniversaries, and so on. There are some myths and facts. We don't only grieve deaths, we grieve all losses. We don't only grieve close family and friends. Anyone who cares, we grieve. They grieve for a loss. Grief is not just an emotional reaction, as we have seen. It manifests in many ways. And grieving happens in private. No, we can't control where we decide to grieve. Sometimes we might have a complete breakdown in work. Sorry about the bad spelling. We don't slowly and predictably recover. It's a very uneven process. It can catch us unawares. It does not mean letting go. It means continuing a bond in a different way. It doesn't end. We just learn to live with it. And grievers are not best left alone. They need opportunities to share memories and receive support. There is a section on bereavement. We're out of time because I didn't quite factor in how long that exercise would take. But bereavement is the event of losing somebody. And again, I'll share these slides with you. There is the immediate loss of the person. There are the secondary losses like we talked about. And there are further losses that's more emotional. Yeah. And also practical, income, roles, and so on. And each of these require adjustment and adaptation. And what are some of the emotions we feel at bereavement? We could feel sad, of course, but we could also feel angry. We could be numb, like some of you said. We could be panicky. Some of us could be anxious. Some people might be relieved, especially when the suffering was intense. And some people feel guilty. And the guilt is sometimes made worse by people around us. And anger is a particularly difficult emotion because socially we are not allowed to express anger against somebody who has died. Yeah. And it also is a very, very difficult thing to express. It's a very, very powerful and menacing sort of feeling. And unfortunately, if you don't express anger, and especially because it's not allowed against people who are not well or people who have died, it can manifest in other ways It can start affecting your relationship with other people. It can result in guilt. You can have overreactions and explosive outbursts for seemingly small stimulations. It affects, like I said, your social relationships. You might withdraw. It might, anger turned inwards often is depression. And, or it could just cause you to become apathetic and cynical or low self-esteem. There are many things. So it's very important. Bottom line is it's very important to express anger in a safe way. When you meet somebody who's experienced a bereavement, look out for these positive factors. Do they have any secure relationships around them and within the community? Look for those relationships and bring them out. Any healthy coping styles or personality traits, encourage those. Yeah. If there's any social support, mobilize it and see how well they're able to communicate. Is this person someone who's not verbally articulate, but may express themselves in other ways? Then see what other ways that they will express their grief. And people in bereavement tend to not look after their health. It's important that we ensure that their healthcare needs are met, especially with caregivers who've been long-term caregivers. They usually neglect their health. So try and get them to also look after their health. And why are we providing bereavement support after somebody has died? One, to identify and support their coping strategies, see what the risk factors are and how we can reduce them, identify and facilitate protective factors, like I just told you, and establish a channel for future support. Let them know that you're there. Again, these are self-explanatory slides. I'm going to leave these with you. I'm not going to go through them in detail at the moment. And even this is a self-explanatory sort of slide where what are the things you need to do? You have to, especially if you're working in palliative care, it's not that you just get the information at the time of death or after. It's a process that you're engaged in right throughout. If it's a multi-professional team, multidisciplinary team, they have to be involved. Documentation assessment is very important. And you have to determine, you have to plan your follow-ups. It can't be, oh, we get together to ventilate their feelings. No, what is the purpose of having that conversation with somebody? If I'm going to meet somebody next week, what is the purpose of my conversation with them? We're just not going to hang out so that the person feels supported, right? You have to understand that there are some people who might be more vulnerable than others because of various reasons, and they need special attention. And check whether your interventions are working or not. Okay. Finally, I'm going to stop with this slide. Initial intake and assessment happens when you first encounter the family, when you first meet them. It doesn't mean that the patient is close to death. It could mean anytime the person comes into your service. As the disease progresses and death becomes imminent, we do another assessment to see who is at risk. Is there somebody here who has not accepted that this is happening? Is there someone here who is still in denial? Who in the family is making the decisions? What sort of support structure do they have? On the day of the death, the thing you need to help somebody with is not so much emotional support, but practical support. Okay, can I get the paperwork done for you? Is there somebody you would like me to call for you? Can I help you organize an ambulance? Those kind of things. That's the kind of support, because very often people become numb, their problem solving ability is shattered. So come in and help them solve those problems. 2 weeks after the death, usually you have a period of mourning. 2 weeks after the death is when, they're starting to come to terms with the fact that, okay, the death has happened and so on. That's when you check with them. They might tell you, see, all of this time, right from the initial intake to imminent death, they might have disclosed various things to you. I'm so worried, yeah, after he goes, how am I going to support myself financially? It could be that, he was really the one who was the fun person in our family. Without him, the rest of us just keep fighting. Those kind of things they might have told you. 2 weeks after the death is a good time for you to also start checking up on those things. How are you managing this? And finally, we do a check-in after 1 month. Why 1 month? Because by then the noise has died down. Family members have left, relatives have left. This is where those secondary losses are starting to emerge. And this is where you can offer practical support. Again, the next few slides will tell you more details of each of those sections that I shared with you. I'm going to leave that with you. And what is it that you can do? What action can you take? And what strategy can you employ? These are all very, it's very easily readable. I'm going to share these slides with you. So please take your time, and I'm happy to answer questions about these later. And lastly, not just as counselors, but just as regular people, when you encounter somebody who has lost someone, this is where we struggle, right? With our condolences and stuff. Here are some do's and don'ts. Please don't say, call me if you need anything. The person is already dealing with a lot. The last thing they need to do is think of one more thing to tell you. You're putting pressure on them. They're not going to do it. Instead, if you know them well enough, offer specific forms of practical support that you think they need help with and that you can definitely do. Something that you can deliver on. Example, babysitting the children, making a meal for them, taking care of the elderly parents for a day or two, picking up groceries, doing their shopping, driving them to the bank to close some accounts. Those kind of things. Do that kind of stuff. Don't say, call me if you need anything. Don't avoid taking the deceased person's name. We do this sometimes. Share instead, what you can do is share a happy memory or an act of kindness or even a joke that you experienced with the deceased person, a good memory. If you don't know the person well enough, if you're a healthcare provider, if you're an acquaintance, ask them to tell you something about that deceased person. Tell me more about your dad. Okay? Because that's what people who are grieving want. Don't rush in to say something for the sake of it. Silence is very, very powerful. It's okay to sit quietly. You can say, I don't have the words right now that can comfort you. I'm just going to sit with you for a while. That's fine. Don't say he or she is in a better place and it was God's will. It really very rarely helps anyone. Acknowledge that this is painful. I know this must be so hard for you. That's all you need to say. You don't need to say he's in a better place. And please don't compare their loss with anybody else or your own story. Oh yeah, so sad, your father, but at least see, he was 80 years old. Yeah, he had a good life. Look at that other person over there. She's lost her 20-year-old son. Don't diminish their loss. Okay. So these are some do's and don'ts. And with that, I'm going to stop our session. Sorry, we've extended by a few minutes, but if, like I said, any of you have any questions with the slides that just sort of expand on some of the slides I've taken you through, I'm very happy to answer them for you. Okay. So I hope that it wasn't too heavy a session, that you will go back and chill for the rest of the day. Hold on to those chits. And if any of you want to come back to me with any residual, trigger feelings that has left you with, I'm happy to support you with that as well. Okay, Senior.
Yes, ma'am.
Good, madam. Good session. Done well.
Thank you. See you soon. Look after yourselves and please fill in the feedback.
Thank you, ma'am. I think we could wind up. There are no questions in the chat box. Many are thanking you. Thanks for the great session. And thank you so much. And I have shared the feedback link with you in the chat box and in your WhatsApp group also. So please do fill it up for our sake. And thank you all. We'll see you on the next class. Until then, bye. Thank you, Smriti, ma'am.